Hey everybody, my name is Garen Hess. I'm the founder and CEO of Consensus, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to DEMOFEST, the sales engineering virtual conference, pre-sales focused and pre-sales driven. The day is finally here, and it's exciting. As you can see on this opening slide, we have 24 sessions, 32 industry experts and leaders, and over 3,500 sales engineering professionals that have all come together to learn together. So really excited about that, obviously. And I wanted to share, speaking of learning, a little experience here. And I hope it's okay with my friend Peter Cohen, who's most likely in the audience with us at this moment, because I just had this idea right before we started today. Peter came out to visit us in Utah. We're based in the Salt Lake City area. And Peter, if you don't know, is a pilot. So I hope he's okay with me sharing a couple of photos. I asked him to take me up in his plane when he came to visit a few weeks ago. And we had a great ride, and I was just really comfortable. And Peter, if you know Peter Cohen, is somewhat of a legend in the pre-sales industry, and many of you do know him, I'm sure. And I said, I felt so safe up there in the air with him. I said, Peter, I think you're as good a pilot as you are a sales engineer. And without hesitating, he said, well, that is to say then that I still have a lot to learn. And so I wanted to just emphasize, I thought if Peter, after all these years in the industry, teaching so many of us so many things, has a lot to learn, so do we all. And that's why we're all here together. And you know, I thank Peter, and I thank so many like him and all of you in the audience that have contributed so much to the industry. So I want to, speaking of learning, jump in to the reason we're here in this particular hour is to hear from Todd Janzen on the keynote topic, which is the sales engineer of the future. And I'll introduce Todd in just a minute. Really excited to have you all hear his session. First, a few housekeeping items and things we wanted to share with you. First of all, I wanted to point out that if you like DEMOFEST, if you think it's relevant information for you, if it's helpful to you in your career or on your team, there are a lot of other pre-sales resources out on the Consensus website. So Consensus is the organization hosting this conference. And I wanted to give you just a little bit of information about Consensus. So Consensus is intelligent demo automation software. And the way this works is that Consensus, well, the pre-sales teams builds a reusable library of interactive video demos that sales sends out on demand. And then it tracks engagement and brings prospect to those live demos in a way that they're educated and ready to talk specifics. So this reduces unqualified demos to near zero, and it can double your SE team's productivity. So if you want to see more information about Consensus, you can see an automated demo. We're going to post a link in the chat here. And you can also go out to goconsensus.com. So, but beyond that, you can just find a lot of amazing pre-sales resources out here at goconsensus.com/resources. So just want to point that out. Also, some of you may have downloaded last year's sales engineering compensation and workload report. This year's report is coming out on May 26th. So you can see a link to that in the chat, in the menu on the left-hand side. So that menu item is called the SE report. Now you can't get access to the report itself yet because it's not completely published, but you can go sign up for it. So register early for that. And finally, I just want to point out, if you have questions during the session, please put them into the Q&A area in Whova, up in this area. And we will hopefully have time near the end of the session for a Q&A period, and Todd can answer questions. Also, please give us some feedback on this session and in every session by clicking the Rate the Session button in the Whova interface down in the left there. So we are recording this session, and we'll be posting the links to the recordings in about 2 weeks in the Scaling Pre-Sales and Sales Engineering LinkedIn group. So we encourage you to join that group, and we're going to paste a link to the group in the chat window here in just a minute. So please take the time at some point to go out and join that group, and that way you'll get those session recordings. Now, I want to introduce you to our keynote speaker. Todd Janzen. So Todd, he is the Global Vice President of Q Branch at Salesforce. And in terms of sales, Q Branch is where sales teams come for deal closing stories, prototypes, visionary demos, jaw-dropping presentations, and videos. And over the past decade at Salesforce, he's built Q Branch from a napkin idea into 10 unique teams and 180 employees around the world, more than 180 employees. And Todd's extremely passionate about the sales engineering profession and is an engineer to the core, both by education and profession. He loves working with diverse people, solving complex problems, and building things that scale. When not working, you can find Todd with his wife and 3 kids soaking up the outdoors or hitting the trails on a mountain bike. So Todd, welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, Garen. Thank you for having me. I am really excited to, let's see here. Let's get the screen moving here. First things first, Garen, are you seeing my presentation?
Yep, we see it and we hear you loud and clear.
All right. So extremely grateful to be here. Very excited to share with the pre-sales community really a learning journey that I've been on over the last year, combined with a lot of research I've been doing over the last couple of months in preparation for today. So I'm just going to jump right into it. And here's what the agenda looks like. So first, I'm going to talk about the new pre-sales landscape. We're then going to talk about how consumer buying changed in 2020. We're then going to shift to talk about how consumer buying is influencing B2B buying. And then we'll close talking about the opportunity ahead for pre-sales. So the new pre-sales landscape, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say more changed in the last 18 months in pre-sales than in the previous 8 years. So if we look back, call it 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't a lot going on with regards to pre-sales kind of globally as a collective. There weren't any tech companies or apps just focused on the pre-sales profession. Now, I know someone's probably going to debate me on that, but when I think about apps where the app was designed for SEs and you were marketing to the SEs and trying to sell SEs on buying that app, it was a pretty thin landscape. And of course, because there was no apps, there's no funding going into that area. There was not a lot of community going on. There might have been some small groups here and there, like on LinkedIn and other forums. But historically, and I think we'd all agree, we've done a pretty poor job of coming together and sharing best practices. There were 0 podcasts, and there were really no conferences, webinars, or research happening in the world of pre-sales. So if we fast forward to today, things have really exploded, and where I've seen the explosion was really in the last 18 months. So if you go out there and look, there are 11 apps out there, 11 plus, just focused on the pre-sales profession. They are made for SEs. They are targeting SEs, trying to sell to SE organizations. And in the last 18 months, there's been over $291 million in venture capital funding are going into those apps and companies. So it's on the map, and the VCs have recognized it, and it's starting. The community. So SE New York's been around for a while. North American Association of Sales Engineers has been around for a while. But right at the beginning of March, April last year, the pre-sales collective exploded onto the scene. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in some detail, but this community has really rallied around that collective, and it's been incredible to watch. Podcasts. You might not know this, but there are 6 podcasts for this profession now. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. And then, Garen was actually showing some of this prior to kicking this off. There are conferences, webinars, all kinds of research going on. That 2021 compensation and workload report is fascinating. If you are a sales engineer, leader, or manager, solution engineer, leader, manager, you are definitely going to want to pay attention to that. In doing my research, I came across probably one of the coolest assets I've ever seen with regard to pre-sales. And it's this sales engineer kingdom map that Patrick Bassong put together. Patrick's, I think, founder of Sales Hero out of Europe. And it is a Game of Thrones-like map highlighting a lot of those apps that have come about just focused on pre-sales. And not just the apps, but as you can see in the upper right-hand side there, the sea of ancient knowledge, right? The experts that have been in this industry for a long time. This thing is so cool. I want to print it out, frame it, hang it above my mantle. I can't wait. Actually, that's probably not true. My wife is not going to allow that. So it'll probably be me, this poster in my garage hanging out, which I do a lot anyway. So anyway, but I want to talk more about that community that exploded onto the scene with the Pre-Sales Collective. So really launched kind of April 2020, currently sitting at 11,000 members, 25 local chapters, 52 podcasts, 85 blog articles, 52 live events, 4 enablement courses, 5,100 people in Slack, and it goes beyond that. It's helping people find jobs, 665 jobs posted, and it's helping candidates find those jobs, 270 candidates. So think about that. We're a year in. You know, I look at pre-sales, and we're probably the largest group of sales professionals outside of the salespeople themselves. And we haven't done anything like this in our history. And over the last 18 months, we've really come together to share best practices and get to know each other. Podcasts, as I mentioned, there's 6 podcasts for the pre-sales profession. Let me say that again, because it's kind of a pinch me moment. There are 6 podcasts, and I counted it up on Spotify. There's over 350 episodes. And I find myself turning on these podcasts a couple times a week, whether I'm on the bike or taking a walk, and just learning from professionals out there. It's really, really quite incredible. So let me just close out that section by saying, look, I think it's a really good time to get plugged into this community. Don't go it alone, tap into the experts. I think historically as SEs, right, because we know so much about our companies and the product, we feel like we have the secrets to the kingdom. Look, you can still join this community and not give away the secrets. You can just share best practices that benefit us all. I think no better example than that workload and compensation report. That is going to benefit everyone. And I'm really energized over the last 18 months and have this feeling of, wow, this is kind of one of the best times to be in pre-sales. So I want to shift now and talk about how consumer buying changed in 2020. So I've been doing a lot of research here. 2020 was an abnormal year, as we all know, but what impact did it really have on the buyer? And so there's a gentleman by the name of Brian Solis. He's a futurist. He has several books out there, X being one of them. It's one of my favorite books. And Brian's talking about something called the novel economy, right? And it's kind of the post-COVID economy. And a lot of these topics that he's bringing up are not net new. He's been talking about them for a very long time. COVID just really kind of accelerated them. So something Brian talks about is that it takes 66 days for a new thing to become a habit, 66 days. And so what Brian is saying is that COVID-19 created a new consumer in just 90 days. And it's backed up by this report from McKinsey. So McKinsey says COVID-19 accelerated 10 years of US e-commerce growth in just 90 days. That's a hockey stick of hockey sticks. And look, like the data shows it, and I think this is super believable, but what make this might be more of a believable is that we saw our parents and grandparents ordering groceries from our phones or similar types of things. So we know it to be true, right? The laggards have caught up. Another thing Brian talks about is how COVID accelerated the on-demand economy, where impatience is a virtue. And so when we talk about the on-demand economy, he's really talking about choice, immediacy, convenience, accuracy, experiential. Pay attention to that word experiential. It is going to come up so much in the next half an hour. Integrated, personalized, and trust. And I've highlighted some of these words in red because I feel like these are some of the words that pre-sales can be associated with. Brian goes on to talk about how the digital first brands really thrived last year. And some of these brands we're familiar with. These are brands where you can go experience it. There's an ease of use. There's an experience you have when you're a customer of them. And in some cases, like Purple mattresses and some of these other things, like you can sleep on that bed for 6 months. And if you don't like it, get your money back. And so you're probably at this point saying, well, Todd, why are you talking to me about these consumer brands? Probably very few of us on this call are competing with them. But this is what Brian says, and it really got my attention. Brian says, we compete with these brands, even if they are not in our industry, because we are competing at an experiential level. I'm going to say that again. We are competing at an experiential level. There's that word again. And it's not just backed up by what Brian's saying, and Brian's kind of been saying this for a long time. This was part of the 6th edition State of Marketing report, where they interview over 7,000 marketing professionals globally. 84% of customers say the experience a company provides is as important as the products and services. So there's the data to back it up. Now, when I hear that, I want to go look at some of the industries that, we often consider you're never going to take the salesperson out of the process, or they're going to be the last ones to evolve. And so the real estate industry, right? Let's go look at that. So this is a report generated by Redfin. 63% of 2020 home buyers made an offer sight unseen, shattering the previous year's record of 32%. Now I've highlighted that word sight unseen in red because I'll lead the witness here a little bit. That might be synonymous with someone buying your product without seeing a live demo. So just trying to make that bridge there. So even the home buying experience is evolving, and we're seeing this, right? So one of my favorite laggard industries, the one that is probably the most painful, the car industry. So when we go look at them, what happened in 2020? Well, in 2020, consumers spent 8% less time at the car dealership, and satisfaction increased by 7%. So those numbers are not outrageous, right? And I think this is mostly speaking to the new car experience. But even the car industry knew they needed to go digital and reduce time at the dealership because no one loves that experience. And we're seeing all this on the used car sales market. There's all these apps out there where you can go buy a car without talking to anyone. So even the laggards in industry are coming up to speed. And so I'm going to make a little jump here. I look at those trends and I think, wow, the B2B buying experience is going to need to start to look more like B2C. And even sales reps are acknowledging this. So in the 4th edition State of Sales report that just came out, 6,000 sales professionals interviewed globally, 58% of sales reps think their job has changed forever. So that it's being recognized by the salespeople themselves. And in that same report, they had executives rank the top 5 tactics for success over the next 12 months. Number 1 was increased flexibility with customers. 3 was a simplified sales process. 4 was personalized outreach. And I've put arrows next to those because, again, this is where I feel like the pre-sales community and profession has a lot of say and could potentially influence that. Something else is starting to really accelerate, and that is the rise of product-led sales. If that's a new term to you, these are products that have historically been referred to as freemium or viral, ease of use, self-guided, or this concept of that you're going to get some money out of it, you're going to be able to use it before you actually have to pay money for it. And so we've really seen an explosion of companies doing this. We've seen an explosion of venture capital money flowing into those companies as well. Here's that word again, right? The whole idea of product-led sales is you get to experience the product before talking to sales. And it's really about the buyer's journey. And this shouldn't be a mystery to us because this is what we do as consumers. We get to try Spotify before we subscribe. We get to try Netflix before we subscribe, right? So we're just taking this behavior that is very natural to us now and expecting it in the B2B world. I got to plug this webinar because this is where I really gleaned all my intelligence from it. This was out on the Pre-Sales Collective. It was called the New Customer Journey, and star-studded panel, incredible use of your time. I believe we'll be posting the link to this because it's just so fascinating. But one of the panelists on there said what they loved about product-led sales is that it's this one-to-many motion, right? Sales is always on. Someone could be up at 3 a.m. somewhere in the world and experiencing your product and eventually leading to them buying it. One thing they also do is dispel this myth that it's not just for simple solutions. So we're seeing actually really complex solution adapting this model, right? And some of those companies are below. Some of those solutions are simpler than others, but I wouldn't claim that Snowflake's a simple solution. Last thing I'll say on this, and it's kind of important, I think there's very few companies out there that are just like pure product-led sales model. Most of these companies have some kind of hybrid approach where it might start there, but then there is some kind of sales motion as well. So don't get the sense that like things are just hard pivoting going that direction. A lot of companies are doing a blend of this. One of the highlights for me in this webinar, and I just thought I'd share it. So Joe Caprio, who was moderating the session, Joe, I can't wait to meet you someday. He was trying to buy a $7,000 application, and he was frustrated that he couldn't trial it, he couldn't experience it, he couldn't see what it actually did, and he expressed that frustration to the young sales rep, and the young sales rep said, well, that's not our process. Our process is today we do discovery, and tomorrow you can get a demo. And Joe responds to him, says, I bought and sold 2 homes during a pandemic without talking to a human. I don't need your sales process. I need a solution to my problem. And I love that quote because I think, we all can feel that way when we see a sales process getting in our way of education. Thank you to John Kerr for forwarding this to me. John, I think you're coming up next and you'll be digging into some of this as well. But this was a survey done as part of the Mastering Technical Sales 4th edition that's coming out or is already out. And so again, they're asking the buyer which of these groups provided the most value to you and your team. And I won't make you do any math here, but what the buyer is saying is that pre-sales is 2 times more valuable than the AE and 3 times more valuable than the executive team. Again, I'm not here to pick on salespeople, right? This is what the buyers are telling us. I'm very grateful for all the sales professionals I've worked with in my career. So this is not going there. I also know my audience today, but again, this is coming from the buyer. So messenger right here. And Gartner, right, is also backing up some similar types of things. So when we ask the buyer, what is the most influential sales interaction? No surprise, technical demonstrations. Second is sales presentations tailored to your company's needs. And you could read through this list, and a lot of these things have everything to do with SEs and pre-sales. So, I look at that and I really think we need to make this shift from a sales motion to a buying motion. It's people just have less patience for this stuff. One of my favorite quotes is this quote from Gartner that kind of backs that up. And they say that 83% of the deal is done without the sales rep. So this is a number that creeps up every single year. I'm very curious to see what it looks like post-COVID. It's probably going to creep really high. But what Gartner's saying here is that even some of the best sales professionals are responsible for 17% of the deal. The rest of the deal is done by the stakeholders getting educated and selling within their company. That's what this quote is saying. And so I want to dig in on that a little bit, and I want to extract some pain. As pre-sales, we're trained to sell to pain. So let's go down the pain path here. So I'm going to ask just a very simple question. Have you ever been through your own sales process? And I put up here a pretty generic B2B sales process. where there's some kind of marketing qualification, there's some kind of SDR, BDR qualification, there's AE qualification. And if that all goes well, your customer is going to see the product maybe for the first time, or they're going to get to talk to your SEs for the first time. And what's really interesting when we look at that, customers are 55% or more through the sales cycle when they engage with your SEs. Now that's kind of scary to me. That feels like way too late in the cycle to be talking to the experts or getting a little deeper glimpse into the product. And so when you think about this, how do we then pull our SE's knowledge earlier in the sales cycle, right? And there's probably several ways to do this, and there are several ways to do this. And so I started thinking through some of those. Okay, like you could maybe ask for like double, triple the headcount. Look, I listened to a lot of these webinars. I talked to a lot of you out there. That's probably not happening. Okay, well, we could introduce our solution engineers earlier in the sales cycle. Okay, well, that sounds like a horrible idea. We know that half of the industry says that 30% of demos are unqualified. So that doesn't sound like a great solution. And so what I don't want to go down this path of, because we're going to start talking about automation and video, because I think people can get a little skeptical and say like, whoa, where are you going with this? Are we talking about replacing SEs with videos? And I'm not going there at all. Here's what I'm saying. I think the SE skills, the one-on-one interaction, the meetings, they've never been more relevant. But you can't create awesome and amazing SEs with all these skills on the right-hand side if they're getting sucked into harbor cruises and they're spending time on unqualified deals. So I just want to make that really clear. Like that stuff is relevant. What I'm talking about is how do we unleash some of that knowledge early in the sales cycle without the SE being involved, right? Another way to put it is we're gonna continue to skill up our SEs and hire amazing SEs. But what happens if your customer never gets to them? What if they fly out of the funnel before that? Because as we've been talking about, there's a new consumer out there and they don't have a lot of patience to go through a lengthy qualification and sales cycle. One thing I just wanted to highlight here is that it's not just about lobbing in generic videos to provide them that. It has to be personalized, it has to be tailored. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But I put the consensus icons up here to also say that it's not a one-way street. If you're doing this right, your customers are getting educated with those personalized videos and you're getting all those analytics back. And that is then feeding the discovery for the SE. So by the time your SE does get engaged, we actually know a ton about what they're interested in. And again, we're going to accelerate things. We're going to be better prepared to talk to that customer. Hopefully I've intrigued you a bit and you're starting to think about this. Maybe some of you are ahead of me and you're like, okay, this sounds good. How do I get started? Garen, I hope you don't mind. I snuck this in here. I've been citing all my resources on my slides up to this point. I'm going to be talking about a lot of things from your book. So I think it's only fair that I cite the source here.
Well, thanks for the shout out.
Sure. So the good news is there's actually a guide out there to how to make this shift. And so when the book came out, grabbed a copy, best summer read. It changed my whole perspective on this. And the book is called Selling is Hard, Buying is Harder. And it's really about this topic of buyer enablement. Garen, tomorrow you are doing a deeper session on the topic of buyer enablement. I could not encourage people more to go attend that session. But again, let's talk about pain. At the top there is a traditional sales cycle. We make contact with someone. We do presentations, we educate them, we do demos, all to get introduced to the second person. We do the same thing, third person. And it's no mystery why sales cycles drag out for so long. And as we all know, time is the enemy of the close. And so with this approach of buyer enablement, right, you're sending in these personalized videos and they're going viral. People can watch these on their own time. People can re-watch them and get educated, and it really accelerates the time frame in which you can identify and educate new stakeholders. So I'm going to spend the next couple minutes just giving you like the cliff notes on buyer enablement. No way I can do it justice, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a teaser as to what buyer enablement is. It's kind of perfectly summed up in this quote from the book: Prospects want to be educated, not sold to. And so these are the three pillars of buyer enablement. It's automation, it's personalization, and the last one is anticipating the buyer's needs before they do. So let's pick off this first one, automation. This is really kind of code word for recorded demos or recorded video, right? People are doing this a lot today, right? They're putting things on YouTube, AEs, SDRs, BDRs are sending links and emails. Sometimes it's in-app as part of the experience where customers can view these things. So I don't think this is novel or new. I'll even take it a step further to say like everyone's kind of doing it. I think the challenge with it is that none of it's personalized. Like sending the customer prospect out to YouTube to a page with 20 videos on it is not personalization. Sending them a generic video that's 10 to 15 minutes long where they can't actually choose the topics they're interested in is not going to work. People want to be prescribed to and they want to watch it on their time. And so yes, it's personalization, but you have to personalize to all the stakeholders in the process. And so just to hit the point hard, Consensus absolutely crushes this. So if you're looking for an off-the-shelf solution that just crushes those first two categories, this is a great tool for that. And it's why we're using it, right? I thought long and hard about, could we build something like this, right? And now that I'm kind of down this path, it's like, yeah, probably 2 years from now, would have had something. And after I had it, then I would have started the journey of trying to change behavior within the company. And the change management, I think, is really the challenge. So I'm happy to have something that checks this box off the shelf. All right, third pillar, anticipating the buyer's needs before they do. What does this mean? So this means when a customer prospect comes to you and says, hey, I'd like to see a demo. Great. Send them a link to a personalized video. But what you might also want to send them in a follow-up or maybe even in the same email is a link to a success story. Because once someone sees your product and they go, this might actually work for us, their next question is going to be, I wonder who else is using it. Another scenario might be integration. Hey, we want to learn more about integration. So great, send them that video. You might also want to send them a security white paper or a security video, because guess who's not far behind? So this is this concept of anticipating your buyer's needs before they do. Again, it's an education process. And this is the hard part. This part's on you, right? This is what you need to develop and this is what you need to think about. I'm going to move pretty fast through this, but just to kind of go right to the point on where you would need to get started, you're going to need to start building the demo library. And I know I'm fast forwarding ahead here. But like I've said, I've been on this journey with Consensus over the last year, and it has been an amazing experience. They've produced the 6 demo types here. So this is all Consensus. And I'm sure this is linked somewhere. It's pretty easy to find, but I would get very intimate with these definitions of what types of demos there are. They've done an amazing job of kind of categorizing things that we've all thought about, like, oh yeah, not all demos are created equal. What are those categories? And one of the key areas I think you need to hone in really early are micro demos and qualifying demos. So the micro demo, let me back up. Vision demos, I think this is a lot of what marketing produces, and it exists probably on your website. So we're not kind of talking about those, but micro demos is someone's real first look at a product, and it kind of bridges that vision with the solution. These demos might be called harbor cruises by your SEs, and this is not where we want to spend our time. But here's the point: just because we don't want to spend our time there doesn't mean they're not extremely valuable to a customer or prospect early in the cycle. They need to see the product early. They want to see the product early. And so this is an area for automation. And the next area to probably start looking at is qualifying demos, right? You get a little deeper dive and differentiation. The stars of the show, by the way, for these demos, they're pre-sales, right? We have to start unlocking some of that and making it more easily available to the customer. So with that, I think you need to start thinking about video skills. Last year was very different for a lot of us. And yeah, like probably a lot of us were already doing a ton of Zoom calls, not a big deal. But when you go to record demos, it's kind of a different skill. So, I would expect that, SEs start to get comfortable with Camtasia or similar technology, really start to master the 3 to 4 minute demo video. And I'm even seeing some really cool innovation happening across pre-sales with SEs using something called OBS or similar technology, Open Broadcast Studio. You might think of this as almost like what news anchors have, where some kind of graphic displays on the screen to the left or the right of them, right? And here's kind of an example of that. So SEs are evolving, right? They're starting to play with these technologies, and I think this is going to be a skill that we need to start paying attention to. All right, so let me kind of bring things to a close here, and it looks like we'll have some good time for Q&A. So let me just kind of close with thoughts on kind of what does SE of the future look like and some of the challenges ahead for pre-sales. Before I get into this, right, like I'm not trying to pretend I'm some futurist or that like I have a crystal ball. I'm really making this conclusion on kind of everything I've set up to this point, and I think it's pretty logical. I don't think it's a huge stretch by any means. And again, I'm trying to be provocative. So if you disagree with some of this, good. Let's continue the conversation as a community. But I do believe the SE, the future is connected to the community, right? They're listening to podcasts. They're not going in alone. They're learning from others. As I mentioned at the very beginning, it's been kind of a lone wolf profession, right? We're kind of like bounty hunters doing our own things. And, I don't want to give up the secrets here, but, there is a fine line there, and you can share things and help others without giving up those deep secrets. And, we've seen that in the last year with 11,000 members joining the pre-sales collective. So, operating in a silo, thinking that you have to come up with the innovation yourself, I mean, that's just going out the door. SE of the future thinks about how to unlock and scale their expertise. And so let's say you have a highly technical product. It's this idea of you don't need all your SEs to be deep experts on the data center and all the intricacies of security. You probably just need a handful. And you need one person in that handful to record that so that the others can send it out to customers and unlock that. And I think if every SE kind of adapted that mentality of like, this is my expertise, how do I unlock it so that others can use it? That's, again, video skills is going to be key there. As I mentioned before, I think demo video needs to be a top skill, right? What does the digital showwoman of the future look like? I was just showing that example with OBS. There's some cool technologies out there. As we've been talking about, I think the SE of the future really understands the buyer's journey. They anticipate what that buyer needs before they do. And the last thing here, and this is kind of funny, the SE of the future says no. And I think this is funny because it's kind of not part of our DNA as SEs. It's hard for us to do that. And really what I'm saying here is we need to say no to the stuff we could send to a customer in a personalized video. We need to say no to those harbor cruises and the things that waste our time so that we can go focus on the skills that are unique to us as solution engineers. We're going to hear from a lot of those experts in the next 2 days about those skills. And so if you have a solution like Consensus in place, you can say no to some of that stuff. All right, let me close it out and then hand it back to you, Garen. So the challenge going forward, the consumer has clearly changed. And so I'm going to ask, how is your company adapting? How are you scaling and unlocking your SE's knowledge? Is demo video a skill on your radar? And the last one that I want to spend a little time on here is, are you prepared to change and influence the way your company sells? Let me play this out a little bit. Let's pretend for a moment that everything I've been talking about is really resonated with you. And you're so emboldened that you're going to walk down virtually to your CRO's office or your head of sales office, and you're going to pitch them on buyer enablement. And you're going to say, The consumer has changed. We got to shift from the selling motion to a buying motion. Let me educate you. My guess is that that CRO or head of sales would start to have warning lights flash in their head. And I envision myself doing this, and they would be looking at me saying, wow, Todd seems to be disillusioned and maybe is going to get in the way of our revenue machine here. And if, you know, revenue is declining, they might be very open to this conversation. But if things are going, you know, well to really well, you're probably going to get laughed out of that office. So, you know, I'm here to say that it's going to be very hard, I think, to pitch this concept top down. But here's what I'm experiencing, and this is what's very cool, is consensus is this Trojan horse. And so you're going to bring it in, and the AEs and the BDRs and the SDRs are going to go, wow, this thing is so cool, right? We love this tool because we feel like we're adding value earlier in the sales cycle. I'm helping the customer right away. This is awesome. And then I get all these analytics back on what they're interested in, what I can sell them. Okay, that's going to be like phase one. But that is really the Trojan horse to shift from a selling motion to a buying motion. And if you think about it from the pre-sales perspective, what are we doing? We're unlocking and scaling our SEs, which is awesome. SEs get to spend time doing the things that only they can uniquely do. And one of my favorite things is that we're doing something very, very positive for the buyer. And that's kind of what this whole thing's about. So with that, I'm going to end there. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your time. Garrett, back to you.
Todd, that was awesome presentation. Thank you. I really love the connection between consumer buying behaviors and the B2B buying. I think this is one of the things that I advocate a lot for in buyer enablement is just the buyer empathy. So how do we get empathy? Well, even if we don't do a lot of B2B buying, which we may or may not do, we certainly do a lot of consumer buying. And so there's so much that correlates there, even though the motion's somewhat different, more complicated in B2B, the principles are very similar. So really interesting. Thanks for painting that vision. We do have a couple minutes for questions. So I'm gonna just pull up a few here and then we'll wrap it up. So one of the questions that has come up is, what competencies should pre-sales leaders develop for the SE of the future? And I think you touched on that quite a bit. Is there, you know, one or two in particular you want to emphasize, or any other thoughts on that?
I think I'll just double down again and saying, you know, deep discovery, you know, differentiation, being curious, making sure you're including value in what you're reading back to the customer. And when I say value, like I think these pitches should have numbers in it, right? I remember from sales training back in the day, there's only two types of business issues. There's increased revenue or decreased cost. Like that's it. So how are we representing numbers back during the cycle to say how we're increasing one or decreasing the other? So look, I think those have never been more relevant. But we, you know, like I said, we're not going to get to do that with our customers and prospects if people fly out of the funnel because they can't just see the product early. And again, like keep in mind, people are very unsure if they want to go with your product or solution. Like they might be looking at a ton of other things, and we need to put ourselves, like you just said, in the buyer mindset there. So the one new skill I think we need to start thinking about, and again, I'm not an expert here, and you probably don't have to do this broadly across all your solution engineers, is recorded demo videos. And to me, it is a very different muscle than an SE doing a Zoom call with a live customer.
Yeah.
Like you got to be short and concise.
Well, great. Thank you for that. Well, at least one other question. You mentioned automation, you mentioned kind of personalization at scale and things, and this question relates to that. Do you think that the SE of the future will be 100% digital? Now, they put remote, so I think there's that question. I also hear the question related to this, which you touched on, is are all the tools out there going to replace? But I guess those are two separate questions. Will the SE of the future be 100% remote? And then your thoughts about, you know, down the road, what about just fully automating the SE profession, which I think many people are nervous
look,
about.
I don't think we get there. And if we do, it's going to be a very long time for now. When I think about, you know, are we going to be 100% remote? It's not really up to us. That's really up to our customer. Does our customer want to be in a room with us right now? Does our customer want to be face to face with us right now? And I think that's going to vary by industry. Certain industries are going to want you back on site, handshaking, doing that thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of industries, it's going to take some time. So I think we're remote for a while.
And I love the emphasis on the customer. I mean, what is it that they need, 100%. Right? Yeah.
100%. What are they comfortable with? And then the second part about automation, no, I don't think we fully get there. And what I loved about that webinar about product-led sales, people buy in two different ways. There's a bottoms up, there's a top down. Bottom up, product-led is perfect for, right? A couple of us are going to try this thing out and see if it works. And oh, look, we're getting success, and it grows and grows and grows.
Yep.
Some companies don't buy that way. They want to buy top down.
Yeah, strategic moves. One more question. So what strategic pre-sales activities do you think the SEs will be able to take on as the more repetitive activities that they're currently doing are managed through automation?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is that they're spending time with customers in ways that matter. Also, when they show up to that meeting, the buyer is more educated. The buyer is actually using your company's language, or using your product language because of this. Hopefully, they're honing up on the skills that we mentioned earlier. You know, one thing I maybe didn't hit on hard enough, but I think it's really important is you can go build that video library. You can go build that automation library and be super happy and content with yourself. But if you don't get the AEs and BDRs to send it to customers, you're going to have a real problem. And this is kind of where the change management comes into play. So I would just say, yes, be prepared to start building that library and doing all that, but you better start getting RVP, AVP buy-in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I wish we had more time for questions. We're going to wrap up by just sharing the sessions that are coming up in the next little bit. So next gen pre-sales, the digital hybrid model from Adam Freeman, running a business discovery university for pre-sales by Woody Evans, and the trusted advisor sales engineer with John Kerr. So again, thanks everybody for attending. And Todd, thank you again so much. I know you flipped off your video, but I can't say thank you enough for joining us. It's been a privilege to have you keynote at DEMOFEST this year. So thanks so much for doing it.
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day and enjoy DEMOFEST, everybody. We'll see you in the next session.